Well, hi there. Welcome to the Alabama Nature Center. Today we're going to look at the pond and explore a little bit about the things that live around the pond and in the pond. Kind of find out where the surface meets the water. So when we're looking at our pond today, one of the things we're going to talk about, this is a man-made pond and it was created. There's a stream that comes in at the other end of the pond and the water flows through the center and out the spillway there at that end. If you were to walk around the edge of the pond, though, what you would find is that there are several seeps of water entering into the pond. And so this is fed year-round by water from the ground as well as water from the water cycle from the air. And there is a slight flow all the way through the center. Now at the edges of the pond, the water stands a little bit more still. And so we can explore a little bit the life that's right here on the very edges where the water is slow moving and still most of the time. So we're going to explore the pond by looking around, and we're going to explore the pond by using our net and investigating what's in the surface. Some things that we want you to notice right away. When you look out at the pond, what do you see? Well, there's a few insects flying around right here. We have dragonflies flying around the water. They need to be near the water. They're looking for great places to meet other dragonflies. And here's the thing, dragonflies fly in the air, but they have to have the pond in order to lay their eggs. So they have a life cycle that involves the water and the air. Listen, can you hear the cricket frogs? Because now we have another animal that depends on the pond. He has to go in the water to lay their eggs, but they hang out kind of on the edge of the water, in and out, during their life cycle. Do you hear the birds? There's a reason why they're here. There's lots of insects, and they have to drink. They live near the pond too. There's lots of plants. If you look around the edge of the pond, there may not be many plants in the water that you can see, but there's lots of plants growing underneath the water that are feeding the food chain of the pond. And lots of trees around the edge that are dropping leaves and seeds and things in the water to help feed the smallest of the organisms that live in the pond. When you think of pond, you think fish. Fish is one thing, but we're going to see what else is in there, because our food chain starts way down at the bottom with those plants and works its way up. So we're going to take our net, we're going to go up to the pond and do a little scientific collecting today. So, oh, there's a frog. Come on close, look and see. Right here at the edge of the pond, there is an itty-bitty, tiny little cricket frog. It's one of those frogs we've been listening to. Can you see him? There he goes. Where do you think he's going to go to get away from us? I think if he thinks we're going to eat him, he might jump in the... He's close. He's almost there. He's heading out for the water. But be safe, little frog. We don't want a big fish to get you today. Or a turtle. Okay, back to our collecting. So, I have two tools. I have a net and I have a bucket. And I'm going to use those to collect in the water. Some things I want to be careful about. First of all, I noticed when we were going around the wet area earlier, there's some poison ivy in some places. I don't really want to step in that. I don't want to step anywhere that I can't see the ground in front of me, because I don't want to surprise any animals that might be staying near the edge. I want to walk up to the edge of the water, and I'm going to bend down. Here's what I don't want you to do. I don't want you to go head first and bend over next to the water, because you'll fall in, and that is no fun. But we're going to scoot down, and I'm looking for places on the edge of the water where there's lots of leaf litter and muck, where things are falling in the water, because remember, that's where our food chain starts. So I'm going to take my net. Whoop, I forgot water, because if I find anything, I want it to live. So I'm going to put a little bit of clear water in the bottom of my bucket. I'm going to take out all this extra stuff because I don't want to see it. And I'm going to use my net to collect what lives at the very edge. So, like a scientist, put the net in, and I'm going to touch the ground. And then I'm going to bump it back and forth in a row like 3 times. And here's why we're doing that. We're not just chasing things, we're collecting their habitat. And in collecting their habitat, woo, we're going to get the things plus the places where they live, where they might be hiding. So there was a bluegill fish. We got one little sunfish right there, right off the top. Then I'm going to open up my net, and what I want to do is to look inside and see if I can see anything moving. This muck and this yuck and this gooky stuff here doesn't look very impressive to you and I, but remember, that's where the food chain starts. And there are small organisms that feed off of that and feed off of each other. And so we're watching our net until we see something move. And when we see something move, we are going to very gently pick it up and put it in our bucket back in the water. So we got one fish. Oh, who is that? Somebody's moving. Can you see him moving? He stopped moving there. I'm going to pick him up. And that may not look like much, but let's watch as we put him in the water. Watch what happens. Can you see him? Oh, he's trying to hide under the fish. There he goes, Mr. Damselfly floating around. Now he's settled down. So he's pretty cool. Damselflies, like dragonflies, are one of those insects that depend on the water for their life cycle. They lay their eggs in the water, and when they hatch out into this aquatic nymph. And that's what we have right here. That's his little larval stage, I guess. He does incomplete metamorphosis, so he will hatch out like that and he will grow and grow. Sometimes they can live in the water for up to 2 years before they go to metamorphosis and become an adult on land. Now, he is a predator, just like my dragonfly friends. Now, we've got somebody else here, but he can breathe under the water. What I wanted you to notice were his gills on the end of him. Here's another thing. That little guy, I know he's hard to see, he's a little isopod that lives in the water. So he's feeding off the detritus and all those dead, icky leaves and seeds and things that are in there. Now, just to let you know what's in here, some things that are in here that are not moving. There are some little boy pine cones, the male pine cone parts. They've fallen into the water from the trees around us. There are some sweet gum flowers that have fallen into the water. There are some seeds, let's see, that's some scales, some bud scales from the trees. Then we have some leaves, of course. Then we have this gooey stuff here. It's got some algae in it. What we really think it is oh, what's the word I'm looking for?
Bryozoa.
Bryozoa colony. So if you took this slimy stuff and looked at it underneath the microscope, you would see hundreds of tiny little animals. Very, very, very tiny, living in that colony. And it's kind of yuck and slimy when you think about it, but it's really good for the pond. It helps to break up some of those nutrients so the bigger things can get them. So, we've looked at the edge of the pond. We've done a little collecting. Let's go show you some of the things that we found when we collected earlier. Come on over. I'm going to leave my bucket and my net, and we're going to go look at a bucket full of things that we've collected. So, we've been out here probably, I guess maybe about 45 minutes looking around, and here's what we found. So we found a little common musk turtle. He's a treat for the day. Here, let me take him out so you can see him close up. Of course, I like to see him in the water. He says, "No, don't pick me up today." But he is looking for those little insects and things to eat. They are part of his food chain, and a very important part. See his sharp beak? And check out those webbed feet. All right, I'm gonna put him down. You watch him swim. Or not. There he goes. Remember, he's got to stick his head out of the air in order to breathe. But he doesn't want you to see him, because you might eat him. So along with him, here's another sunfish like we found earlier. And check him out. He doesn't look bright and pretty and blue right now, but that's because we're looking at him from the top down. That's one kind of fish in the pond. And here is our little tiny mosquito fish. Check him out. You may be able to see in the video, his head kind of has a mouth at the end of it, and it's kind of flattened. So when he skims the surface of the water, he can eat the mosquito larvae, because mosquitoes lay their eggs in the pond too, and they start growing in the pond. Let me show you another predator. Check out this six-spotted fishing spider. Now, check him out. He doesn't need gills to breathe, but not all spiders can do this. Look at him. He is walking on top of the water. He really does hang out there. He has extra little hairs on the ends of his legs so that he can raft on top of the water. Let's see if I can move him into the sunshine so you can see his little pedipalps in the front. He's a boy. That makes him pretty cool. He can actually reach down in the water and grab a fish and eat it if he was so inclined. Now next to him, crawling on the bottom of the bucket here, is a freshwater mollusk. He's a snail. He is crawling on his foot down there. You can see his little, they're not antennae. What are they called? Well, they look like antennae that he's using to feel around while he's down there. And he will eat the dead stuff as well. And sometimes Mr. Musk Turtle over here will eat him. It'll be part of his food. Now, we talked about some plants growing in the water that you can't see. This is a pretty neat little plant here. It's one of the bladderworts. Now, check out those little knobs that you see on the plant there. This one is black and this one is clear. That plant actually opens up and closes up. They're like they're little vacuoles, but they're like little pouches, and it can close on a freshwater invertebrate and digest it for food. So not only does it serve as a green plant for things to eat, but it also sometimes can be a carnivorous plant. Now, we found a tadpole this morning. You know, frogs live around the edge of the water. They lay their eggs in the water. Their eggs hatch out into tadpole form. And this guy is one of the bigger tadpoles. He's going to be like a banjo frog or I don't think a bullfrog. I think probably banjo frog around here. All right, and sidling up next to him, he thinks he's finding a safe spot, but he hasn't quite found one yet, is this dragonfly larva. So dragonflies that we saw earlier laying their eggs on the water, they will hatch out into this nymph form here, and this little guy will live in the water for a few months to a couple of years, depending upon the species. He has gills, internal gills on his abdomen. Now let's see if we can get him to move. He is a tremendous predator. He's got little claws on the bottom of his feet, and if we can get him to move here, he moves with jet propulsion. He'll squeeze his little legs together and squirt out a stream of water. Because, of course, he doesn't look too interested in moving today. Here's another species over here by this leaf. They look very different in their colors, but you see their shape is the same. And you can see the big eyes on the front, and his under the water gills are in his abdomen. And what you should do, you should look up dragonfly larvae online or dragonfly nymphs so that you could see their very cool mouth parts that they use to help catch insects to eat. They are very neat. Come look over here, because we found some cool things earlier today. When we first came up to the pond, look here. There's an exoskeleton where the dragonfly larva, or the nymph, climbed out of the water all the way up here, split his skin open, and crawled out. And he sat up here for a while to dry off, and now he's going to fly away and be an adult dragonfly. I just want to show you a couple things. We talked about life cycles. So here's mosquito life cycle. Here's our big mosquito. Thank goodness they aren't that big. Isn't that true? But mosquito lays the eggs and they float on top of the water like a little raft, and then they'll hatch out into these little wigglers. Now check this out. Living in the water, he's got to have a way to breathe. He's got this tiny little air tube that hangs up and touches the surface of the water while he hangs down and wiggles around. That's why they call them wigglers. So he can still breathe, and then he grows larger into his little pupa, and that's probably what you see if you're looking at buckets of water around your house. You'll see these guys living in there if you leave it too long, and then he will go through metamorphosis and become the adult mosquito. And then we have our big frog over here who has laid his eggs in the water, and the eggs hatch out to a tadpole just like the one we found. And as it grows, it's going to grow its front leg, its back legs, and lose his tail. Well, there's a small investigation of the pond today, and you can come out and investigate the pond with us anytime. We do field trips, we do birthday parties, or you could come on summer camp. That's a fun time where you get to explore and investigate the things around you. But if you're at home, you could take a net and a bucket and go see what lives near you. You'll be surprised. Even the smallest puddles will have things to explore. And then don't forget to go look them up and find out how they live or what they're part of, because everything out here is connected to something else. Thanks for spending your time with us today at the Alabama Nature Center.